If someone tried to edit you out of your own child's life story, would you fight back or would you let them win? My name is Eleanor Vance, and this is the story of how I went from watching my son's wedding through a window to owning the company that tried to erase me. The valet took my car keys with the same politeness reserved for hired help. I should have known then. I stood outside a $2 million Charleston mansion watching my son get married through a window. The French doors were locked from the inside. The security guard apologized but explained that my name wasn't on the approved guest list. Have you ever been erased from the most important day of your child's life? My name wasn't on the invitation. Serafina's stepmother was listed as Julian's mother figure. 30 years of working 3 jobs, saving every penny for his Harvard education, and this was my reward. A view through glass like I was watching a movie about someone else's life. What happens when 30 years of sacrifice gets replaced by one wealthy woman's signature? I pressed my palm against the cool window and watched Julian adjust his bow tie. The same hands I'd bandaged after his first bike crash, the same face I'd kissed goodnight for 18 years. He looked happy, confident, like he belonged in that room full of people who'd never missed a meal or worried about rent. The crushed azaleas under my feet released their scent as I shifted my weight. Champagne laughter drifted through the sealed doors. I counted 12 round tables draped in cream silk, each centerpiece worth more than I used to make in a month cleaning offices. Serafina glided across the marble floor in a dress that cost more than my car. Her stepmother, Beatrice, followed close behind, adjusting the train like she'd been part of this family forever. The woman had known Julian for exactly 18 months. I'd known him for 28 years. Missing your child's biggest moment changes you forever. Subscribe so you never miss the signs. The minister raised his hands for silence. Julian turned to face Serafina, and for 1 second, I thought he might look toward the window. He didn't. His smile was radiant, focused entirely on his bride and the 200 guests who'd been deemed worthy of witnessing this moment. Ladies and gentlemen, Julian's voice carried through the glass as he lifted his champagne flute. I want to thank everyone who truly raised me, who showed me what family really means. My breath fogged the window as I leaned closer. He thanked Serafina's parents. He thanked her stepmother Beatrice for being his guiding light. He thanked his Harvard professors, his law firm partners, even his college roommate who'd introduced him to Serafina. He never mentioned my name. The cold brass door handle bit into my palm as I tested it one more time. Still locked, still watching from outside. I pulled out my phone and started recording. If I wasn't going to be part of this memory, I was damn sure going to document it. Most importantly, Julian continued, raising his glass higher, I want to toast my real family. The people who never doubted me, never held me back, and who understand what it means to live with dignity and purpose. The crowd erupted in applause. Serafina dabbed her eyes with a silk handkerchief. Beatrice beamed like a proud mother. Everyone was crying tears of joy except the woman who'd actually raised him. I opened my banking app while Julian kept talking about new beginnings and fresh starts. The numbers on my screen told a different story than the one playing out behind this glass. Vance & Associates, current balance, $847,392.67. Sterling Industries stock holdings, 127,450 shares, market value, $3.2 million. Julian raised his glass one more time. To my beautiful wife Serafina, and to finally finding where I truly belong. As Julian raised his glass to toast his real family, I opened my banking app. Time to show them what real family money looked like. The penthouse elevator required a key card. I had one from the company I'd been cleaning their offices for 20 years. I drove straight home to Birmingham after the wedding. My modest brick house looked exactly the same as when I'd left that morning, but everything felt different now. The mailbox still read Vance. The front porch still needed painting, but the woman who climbed those steps wasn't the same one who'd left hoping to see her son get married. I unlocked my front door and walked into my real life. The living room held 28 years of memories Julian had never bothered to learn about. Business awards lined the mantel where other mothers might display family photos. The Birmingham Chamber of Commerce's Entrepreneur of the Year plaque sat next to my husband's construction helmet, still dusty from the job site where he died. My worn leather chair faced a desk covered with corporate contracts. This was where I'd built my empire, one client at a time, while Julian was busy forgetting where he came from. The polyurethane shine on my hardwood floors reflected the overhead light. I'd learned that technique from cleaning corporate offices, then applied it to my own home. Everything I knew about business, I'd learned from watching other people's companies from the inside. Industrial soap scent lingered on my hands, even after washing them twice. Some smells never leave, some lessons never fade. I pulled out the file cabinet that Julian thought held old tax returns. The folders inside told a different story entirely. Vance & Associates wasn't just a cleaning company anymore. We provided janitorial services to 47 major corporations across the Southeast. Our annual revenue hit $15 million last year. They underestimated the help. Subscribe to see power moves they never expect. The contracts felt heavier in my hands now. IBM, Microsoft, Bank of America. All of them trusted Eleanor Vance to clean their offices, handle their trash, and stay invisible while they conducted business. What they didn't realize was that invisible people see everything. I opened my laptop and pulled up the investment account Julian didn't know existed. Stock purchases dating back 5 years, all made with money I'd earned scrubbing floors and emptying waste baskets. The account balance made me laugh out loud in my empty house. My husband Arthur had always said I was too smart to stay small. He'd believed in me when I had nothing but a mop bucket and determination. Before the construction accident took him away, he'd made me promise to build something lasting, something that would make Julian proud. I'd kept that promise. Julian just never bothered to ask. The Harvard diploma hanging above my desk wasn't Julian's, it was mine. Harvard Business School, completed through night classes while he was busy playing college football. The graduation ceremony conflicted with his championship game, so he never knew I'd graduated summa cum laude. Photos from corporate conferences showed me shaking hands with CEOs, accepting community service awards, speaking at business seminars. I wasn't just the cleaning lady. I was the owner of the company that cleaned for people who would never think to look twice at me. But one file was thicker than all the rest. Ever been invisible in plain sight? Comment your story. I pulled out the Sterling Industries folder. 5 years of documentation, employment complaints from my cleaning staff who worked their facilities, wage theft reports, safety violations, photos of workers being denied basic protections. Alistair Sterling built his wealth by stepping on people exactly like I used to be. The Sterling Industries folder was thicker than the rest. I'd been watching them for 5 years. His daughter married my son today. His company employed my workers tomorrow. And his stock certificates were sitting in my investment account, waiting for the right moment to remind him that the help always remembers how you treat them. The broker called it aggressive accumulation. I called it shopping for justice. I spread the Sterling Industries documents across my kitchen table like battle plans. Stock certificates, purchase receipts, and proxy statements created a paper trail that told the real story. While Julian was falling in love with Serafina, I was falling in love with the idea of owning her father's company. My first purchase came 18 months ago, 500 shares at $42 each. The broker asked if I was sure about investing in a manufacturing company. I told him I knew their business model better than he did. Every month after that, I bought more. Never enough to trigger disclosure requirements. Never enough to draw attention. Just a cleaning lady making smart investments with money nobody expected her to have. The wall charts above my desk tracked more than stock prices. Employee complaints from my cleaning crews who worked Sterling facilities painted a picture that would make any decent person sick. Unpaid overtime stretching back 3 years. Safety equipment denied to save costs. Workers fired for asking about medical leave. Elena Petrova had been cleaning their executive floors since 2019. Every paycheck stub she brought me showed the same pattern. 40 hours worked, 35 hours paid. When she complained, they cut her hours. When she complained again, they threatened deportation. One decision compounds for years. Subscribe so you catch the patterns early. Leo Sanchez lost 2 fingers in a machine that hadn't been maintained properly. Sterling Industries offered him $500 to sign a release form. When he refused, they fired him and contested his workers' compensation claim. Clara Jensen worked double shifts for 6 months when they laid off half the custodial staff. She never saw overtime pay. Her supervisor told her that complaining would mean losing her job entirely. These weren't just employment violations. They were theft. Systematic, calculated theft from people who couldn't afford lawyers to fight back. But I could. My laptop screen showed the current count: 127,450 shares of Sterling Industries stock. Market value fluctuated between 3 and 4 million depending on the day. More importantly, it represented 31% ownership in a company that had no idea who was buying their stock. I needed 20% more for majority control. The math was simple. The timeline was perfect. Alistair Sterling had spent 5 years building wealth by stealing from workers. I'd spent 5 years buying his company with money I'd earned treating workers fairly. The irony was delicious. My phone buzzed with a text from Elena. Another photo from the Sterling executive suite. Wage theft documentation spread across conference tables while executives planned cost-cutting measures. They weren't even trying to hide it anymore. Serafina's engagement announcement had triggered my final phase of stock purchases. While she was planning centerpieces, I was planning a corporate takeover. While Julian was choosing a tux, I was choosing the right moment to reveal who his real family was. The certified letter sat in my printer, ready to send. Legal language that would shake the foundation of everything Julian thought he knew about power, family, and worth. Tag someone who underestimated the quiet one. My cleaning staff had become my intelligence network without even realizing it. Every complaint, every stolen paycheck, every safety violation had been carefully documented and filed away. Alistair Sterling thought he was untouchable because he'd never been challenged by anyone who understood how to fight back. He was about to learn that the woman who cleaned his daughter's wedding venue owned enough of his company to demand answers. The certified letter was already printed. Tomorrow, Julian would learn who his mother really was. Tomorrow, the Sterling family would discover that 30 years of underestimating Eleanor Vance was about to cost them everything. Julian opened the letter at his breakfast bar. I watched his face change through my lawyer's video call. The Atlanta penthouse Serafina's father had bought them as a wedding gift looked smaller on my laptop screen. Granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. Everything money could buy except the one thing Julian was about to lose, his certainty about who held the power. My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, had positioned her camera perfectly. Julian's expression was visible as he tore open the certified envelope marked Urgent Shareholder Notification. What does this mean? Julian's voice cracked as he read the first paragraph aloud. Eleanor Vance, majority shareholder of Sterling Industries, hereby requests. His hands shook. The paper rattled. Evelyn's voice remained calm and professional through the video connection. Your mother now owns controlling interest in your father-in-law's company, Mr. Vance. This notification is required by law when ownership exceeds 50%. Julian looked up from the letter like he'd been slapped. This has to be a mistake. My mother cleans offices. She doesn't own companies. Actually, sir, she owns the cleaning company that services 47 major corporations. Her net worth exceeds $20 million. The tables turn faster than you think. Subscribe to spot the quiet power moves. I watched Julian sink onto his bar stool, still clutching the letter. His law degree from Harvard hadn't prepared him for this moment. All those years studying contracts and corporate structures, and he'd never bothered to ask what his own mother had built. The second page outlined my demands. Full financial audit of Sterling Industries, investigation into labor practices, immediate review of all employee compensation structures, emergency board meeting scheduled for the following week. She can't do this, Julian whispered, but his voice carried no conviction. She can and she has, sir. The stock purchases are completely legal. The documentation is ironclad. Your mother has been planning this acquisition for several years. Julian's phone started ringing. The caller ID showed Alistair Sterling, then Serafina Mobile, then Alistair Sterling again. He let them all go to voicemail. I watched him read the letter 3 more times, his expression shifting from shock to confusion to something that might have been respect or fear. From my angle, they looked the same. The final paragraph was my personal favorite. Miss Vance requests a private meeting with her son to discuss his role in the upcoming corporate restructuring. This meeting should occur before any public statements are made regarding this ownership change. Evelyn ended the video call with professional courtesy. "Mr. Vance, your mother expects to hear from you within 24 hours. Julian called me for the first time in 6 months. I let it go to voicemail." Alistair Sterling's voice cracked when he said, "Majority shareholder." He'd never learned my name. The emergency board meeting convened at 8 a.m. sharp in the Sterling Industries conference room. I'd cleaned this room hundreds of times over the years, emptying trash cans while board members discussed quarterly profits and cost reduction strategies. Today, I sat at the head of the table. 7 board members stared at me like I was a puzzle they couldn't solve. The woman who'd been invisible for 5 years was suddenly the most important person in the room. "Ladies and gentlemen," Alistair Sterling began, his usual confidence nowhere to be found, "we're here to discuss the recent stock acquisition by—" He paused, consulting his notes. "Eleanor Vance." "Mrs. Vance," I corrected quietly. Alistair's face flushed red. "Yes, Mrs. Vance has apparently acquired 51% of our outstanding shares through a series of purchases over the past 18 months. The board members shifted uncomfortably. Alistair Finch, the CFO, cleared his throat. "How is this possible? We have disclosure requirements for any shareholder owning more than 5%. My lawyer, Evelyn Reed, opened her briefcase with practiced efficiency. Mrs. Vance made her purchases through multiple entities, all properly documented and legally compliant. No single entity exceeded the disclosure threshold until the final consolidation last week." Board member Annalise Croft leaned forward. "What are your intentions, Mrs. Vance?" "Change," I said simply. The word hung in the air like smoke. Alistair tried to regain control. "Now see here, I've built this company for 15 years. We're profitable. We're growing. We employ over 400 people." "You employ 400 people," I interrupted. "The question is how you treat them." I nodded to Evelyn, who distributed folders to each board member. Inside were copies of every complaint, every wage theft documentation, every safety violation my cleaning staff had reported over the past 5 years. "Predict which secret breaks their marriage first." Board member Sebastian Thorne opened his folder and immediately closed it again. His face went pale. "Gentleman and lady," I continued, "I'm calling for a complete audit of our employment practices. Full review of compensation structures, investigation into workplace safety compliance, and immediate implementation of a living wage policy for all employees." "Our employees?" Alistair sputtered. "You can't just walk in here and—" "I can," I said, standing up. "I own 51% of this company. I can do whatever I believe is in the best interest of our shareholders and our workers." The room fell silent except for the hum of the air conditioning system. The same system I'd heard every night while cleaning these offices, listening to executives plan strategies that would hurt the very people who kept their buildings running. "The audit will be conducted by an independent firm," Evelyn announced. "Results will be available in 6 weeks." The audit would take 6 weeks. Serafina's world was about to collapse in real time. I walked out of that conference room the same way I'd entered thousands of times before, through the door I'd always used, except this time I owned everything behind it. Elena had been cleaning their executive suite for 3 years. She kept every paycheck stub they shorted. I called the meeting for Saturday morning at my Birmingham office. 7 women and 2 men walked through my front door, each carrying manila envelopes thick with documentation. These were my employees, but more than that, they were my intelligence network. They just didn't know it yet. Elena Petrova sat across from my desk, her weathered hands steady as she opened her envelope. "Mrs. Vance, you said you wanted to know about Sterling Industries. I brought everything." The first paycheck stub showed 42 hours worked, 35 hours paid. The second showed 45 hours worked, 36 hours paid. Every single week for 3 years, the same theft. "They told me overtime was only for full-time employees," Elena said quietly. "But I worked full-time hours every week." Leo Sanchez placed his medical records on my desk. The photo of his mangled hand made me wince. Machine hadn't been serviced in 8 months. Safety inspector was supposed to come quarterly. Never showed. Every worker remembers how they were treated. Subscribed to see justice served cold. Clara Jensen pulled out photographs taken with her phone. Broken safety equipment, exposed electrical wiring, blocked emergency exits. Night shift supervisor said complaints would get us fired, so we stopped complaining. I listened to each story with the patience I'd learned from 30 years of business. Document everything, verify everything, trust but confirm everything. Mateo Diaz had been working weekends for 2 years without overtime pay. They called it volunteer hours for company events, but if you didn't volunteer, your regular hours got cut. Victoria Lane showed me emails from HR, requests for family medical leave denied, sick days docked from paychecks, health insurance claims mysteriously rejected. "Why did you all keep working there?" I asked. The room fell silent. Elena answered for everyone. "Because we needed the jobs, because they knew we needed the jobs." That's when I realized these weren't just employment violations. This was systematic exploitation of people who couldn't fight back, people exactly like I used to be. "What if I told you that you could fight back?" I said. "What if I told you that the woman who owns this cleaning company now owns their company too?" The silence stretched longer this time. Leo spoke first. "You bought Sterling Industries?" "I bought enough to make changes," I said. "Real changes. Starting with paying back every penny they stole from you." Elena's eyes filled with tears. "My daughter's college fund. The money they didn't pay me could have covered her first year." I pulled out my checkbook. "What's your daughter's name, Elena? Which violation shocked you most? Drop it below." The evidence filled 3 bankers' boxes by the end of that meeting. Paycheck stubs, medical records, safety violation photos, and sworn statements from 9 workers who'd been afraid to speak up for years. Alistair Sterling had no idea what was coming. But more than that, he had no idea who was bringing it. Serafina threw her wedding ring at the marble counter. It sounded like breaking glass. I wasn't there to see it happen, but Julian told me about it later. How she'd found out that morning that her father was now working for the woman she'd spent 6 months calling Julian's embarrassing past. The call came from Serafina's best friend, Genevieve. Alistair Sterling had been forced to make a public statement about the ownership transition at Sterling Industries. The local business journal ran the story with a photo of me from the company awards ceremony I'd attended 3 years ago. "Your mother-in-law is Eleanor Vance?" Genevieve's voice carried through Serafina's speakerphone. "The Eleanor Vance who just became the most powerful woman in Birmingham business?" Serafina had laughed at first. "That's impossible. Julian's mother cleans offices." "Serafina, honey. She owns the cleaning company. Vance & Associates has $15 million in annual revenue. She's been featured in Southern Business Magazine twice." The silence on Julian's end of the phone call lasted 30 seconds. Serafina's lasted longer. "You knew," she whispered to Julian. "You knew, and you didn't tell me." "I didn't know," Julian protested. "She never told me about any of this." "Because you never asked," Serafina screamed. "You never asked because you were embarrassed by her." The wedding ring hit the counter 15 minutes into their fight. Julian said it bounced twice before rolling under the refrigerator. By evening, Serafina's social media had gone dark. The woman who'd posted photos of her engagement ring, her wedding dress, and her honeymoon suite every single day suddenly had nothing to say. Her friends had questions, though. Lots of questions. Money shows you who people really are. Agree? Genevieve called again that afternoon. "Is it true your father-in-law has to report to Julian's mother now?" Serafina hung up. Her sorority sisters started texting. "Girl, did you know Julian's mom is loaded?" Serafina blocked their numbers. The country club ladies whispered behind their tennis rackets. "Poor Serafina, all this time acting like she married up." Serafina stopped going to the club. Julian tried to explain. "Maybe we should drive down to Birmingham and talk to my mother. Maybe we can work this out." "Work what out?" Serafina's voice was cold as winter rain. "Work out the fact that I've been making fun of a millionaire for 6 months? Work out the fact that my husband has been lying to me about his family?" "I wasn't lying," Julian said weakly. "I just didn't know." "That's worse," Serafina shot back. "You didn't even care enough about your own mother to know who she really was." The truth hit Julian harder than any accusation could have. He'd been so busy running away from his working-class roots that he'd missed his mother building an empire. Serafina packed 3 suitcases that night. She left the wedding photos on the kitchen table with a note. "When you figure out who you really are, call me." Julian stood in their empty penthouse, still wearing the Armani suit his father-in-law had bought him, holding his phone with my number on the screen. Julian stood in our old Birmingham kitchen for the first time in 5 years. His Armani suit looked out of place. He finally made the call I'd been waiting for. He noticed the business awards on the wall first, then the Harvard diploma mine from night school. Julian stood in my living room like a tourist in a foreign country. Everything was familiar, but nothing made sense. The same couch where he'd done homework. The same kitchen table where we'd shared breakfast before school. But the walls told a story he'd never bothered to read. Southern Business Leader of the Year, 2018. He read aloud from the plaque above my desk. Birmingham Chamber of Commerce, Entrepreneur Award, 2019. Alabama Women in Business Excellence Award, 2020. His voice got quieter with each award. "Mom, when did you get all these?" "While you were busy being embarrassed by me," I said, settling into my worn leather chair. "Would you like some coffee?" He shook his head, still staring at the wall. "This Harvard diploma, this is yours?" "Harvard Business School Executive Education Program. Completed while you were in law school. Graduated summa cum laude." Julian sank onto the couch like his legs had given out. "Why didn't you tell me?" "You never asked," I said simply. "When did you last call me to ask how my week was? When did you last wonder what I was doing with my time?" The question hung between us like a weight. He looked around the room with new eyes. Family photos showed me accepting awards, speaking at conferences, shaking hands with mayors and corporate executives. Photos from a life he'd assumed didn't exist because he'd never looked for it. "The wedding," he started, then stopped. "What about the wedding? I should have invited you myself. I should have made sure you were included." "You should have," I agreed. "But you didn't. You let Serafina's family erase me because it was easier than explaining where you came from. Best lesson comes from ground up. Share your story." Julian's expensive suit looked wrong in my simple living room. Designer labels and Italian leather didn't match the woman who'd raised him or the values I'd tried to teach him. "Serafina left me," he said quietly. "I heard." Her father's lawyer called. "Alistair Sterling wants to meet with you. He wants to discuss terms." I laughed, and the sound surprised both of us. "Terms?" "Julian, I don't need to discuss anything with Alistair Sterling. I own his company." "What are you going to do?" I stood up and walked to my hall closet. Inside, next to my business suits and conference dresses, hung my old cleaning uniform. The same uniform I'd worn for 15 years while building Vance and Associates. I pulled it out and handed it to Julian, along with a pair of work gloves and a bucket filled with cleaning supplies. "You're going to learn what real work feels like," I said. "You're going to understand what your mother did before she became successful, and you're going to meet the people you've been ignoring your whole life." Julian held the uniform like it might bite him. "I don't understand." I handed him a mop. "Your first day starts Monday. Minimum wage. You're going to earn back the right to use our family name, starting from the ground up, just like I did." Julian's manicured hands started bleeding after the first hour. Industrial cleaner doesn't care about law school. Monday morning, 6 a.m. Julian showed up at the Sterling Industries building wearing his cleaning uniform and a look of pure terror. I'd assigned him to Elena's crew, cleaning the executive offices where Serafina's father made decisions about worker pay and safety. Elena handed him a spray bottle and pointed to the first office. "Start with the windows. Use circular motions. Don't leave streaks." By 7 a.m., Julian's Harvard-educated hands were cracked and raw. The industrial cleaning chemicals we used were strong enough to cut through corporate greed, but they were hell on soft skin. "My hands are burning," Julian whispered to Elena during their first break. "Mine burned for 6 months when I started," Elena replied. "But I needed the job. Did you need yours?" Julian looked confused by the question. At 8 a.m., the executives started arriving. Julian watched his father-in-law walk past him without recognition. Alistair Sterling had seen Julian in expensive suits at country club dinners, but he'd never actually looked at the people who cleaned his office. "Invisible, right?" Elena said quietly. "We're furniture to them. Useful furniture." Julian emptied trash cans filled with documents about cost reduction strategies and efficiency improvements. Every piece of paper represented decisions that affected the people working around him. Decisions about their health care, their overtime pay, their job security. Mateo Diaz mopped the floors where executives walked in $1,000 shoes. "My daughter needs surgery." he told Julian during lunch. Insurance company denied the claim. They said it wasn't medically necessary, but she can't walk without pain. Real work teaches what privilege hides. Subscribe for truth that matters. Clara Jensen cleaned conference rooms where board meetings decided her fate. They cut our hours last month, she explained to Julian. But the workload stayed the same, so we do more work for less money. Julian looked at his bleeding hands and realized something profound. This wasn't temporary for these people. This was their life, every day, for years. At lunch break, he sat with Elena in the employee break room. Fluorescent lights buzzed overhead. The vending machine ate quarters. The microwave barely worked. "How long have you been doing this?" Julian asked. 12 years, Elena said. "Started when my husband got sick, needed health insurance." "What did you do before?" "I was a teacher, but teaching didn't pay enough to cover his medical bills." Julian had never considered that the woman cleaning his father-in-law's office might have been a teacher, might have educated children, might have dreams beyond emptying trash cans. "Your mother," Elena said quietly. "She's different from other bosses. She knows our names. She asks about our families." At lunch break, Julian asked Elena about her family. He'd never asked before. For the first time in his adult life, Julian Vance was learning what the real world looked like, what it felt like to be tired at the end of the day because you'd actually worked, what it meant to earn money with your hands instead of your connections. When did you learn what real work meant? His mother had done this job for 15 years while he was growing up. She'd come home exhausted, made his dinner, helped with his homework, and never once complained about her bleeding hands or aching back. She'd done it so he wouldn't have to, and he'd repaid her by being ashamed of her sacrifice. The forensic accountant's report was 847 pages. Page 1 said everything: systematic wage theft. Evelyn Reed called me at 9 a.m. with news that would change everything. The independent audit I'd ordered was complete, and Alistair Sterling's world was about to collapse. "Eleanor, you need to sit down for this," Evelyn said over the phone. I was already sitting in my office, Julian's first week of real work having taught us both more than his Harvard education ever had. He was learning what it meant to earn a paycheck. I was learning that my son wasn't beyond redemption. "How bad is it?" I asked. $2.3 million in stolen wages over 5 years, Evelyn read from her notes. Systematic overtime violations affecting 89% of hourly workers. Safety code violations in every facility. Discriminatory hiring practices targeting immigrants and minorities. I felt my heart rate increase. Not from surprise, but from vindication. Everything my cleaning staff had reported was true. Every complaint, every stolen paycheck, every ignored safety violation. "There's more," Evelyn continued. Tax evasion schemes involving offshore accounts, fraudulent insurance claims, bribery of local safety inspectors. Criminal charges? Multiple agencies are involved now. Labor Department, IRS, FBI. Alistair Sterling is going to need more than expensive lawyers for this one. Justice takes time, but it arrives. Share when yours came. I hung up the phone and walked to my window. Julian was across town, learning what honest work felt like. Serafina was probably packing more suitcases. Alistair Sterling was about to discover that stealing from workers has consequences when someone with power decides to care. My phone rang again. Local news wanted a statement. Business Journal wanted an interview. Social media was calling me a corporate justice warrior. I ignored them all and called Elena instead. "Elena, it's Mrs. Vance. Are you sitting down? Is everything okay?" "Everything's about to be perfect. The audit results just came in. Sterling Industries owes you and your coworkers $2.3 million in stolen wages." Silence, then crying, then laughter through tears. "Elena, you there?" "My daughter's college fund," she whispered. "The money they didn't pay me, it was real. It was real. And you're getting every penny back, plus interest, plus damages." By 2 p.m., Alistair Sterling's personal assets were frozen, pending criminal investigation. By 3 p.m., Serafina had filed for divorce, citing irreconcilable differences and undisclosed financial liabilities. By 4 p.m., Julian called me from the cleaning crew break room. "Mom, there are news trucks outside the building. They're asking about you." "What did you tell them?" I told them Eleanor Vance is the strongest person I know, and it took me 30 years to figure that out. Alistair Sterling's assets were frozen that afternoon. Serafina filed for divorce that evening. For the first time in 6 months, my son sounded proud to say my name. The news crew arrived at 6 a.m. Eleanor Vance was no longer invisible. I watched them set up their cameras from my kitchen window. 3 news vans parked outside my modest Birmingham house, reporters checking their microphones and adjusting their hair. After 30 years of being overlooked, I was suddenly the most interesting person in Alabama. My phone hadn't stopped ringing since the audit results went public. CNN wanted an exclusive. Forbes was writing a feature story. The Today Show offered to fly me to New York. I ignored them all and made coffee instead. The doorbell rang at exactly 7 a.m. Channel 6 News, the same station that had covered Serafina's society wedding 6 months ago. The reporter looked young enough to be my granddaughter. "Mrs. Vance, I'm Cassandra Hayes from Channel 6. Can we talk about your corporate takeover of Sterling Industries?" I opened the door wider. "Come in, but wipe your feet. I just mopped those floors myself." She looked confused by the instruction but followed it anyway. I sat in my worn leather chair while she perched on the edge of my couch, the same couch where Julian had eaten cereal and watched cartoons 20 years ago. The same room where I'd planned my corporate strategy while he was busy forgetting I existed. "Mrs. Vance, how does it feel to go from cleaning lady to corporate owner overnight?" "I didn't go from anything to anything overnight," I corrected. "I built Vance & Associates over 15 years. I earned my Harvard Business School diploma at night while working 3 jobs. I bought Sterling stock with money I made, treating workers fairly." Cassandra scribbled notes frantically. "What message does this send to other working women?" I thought about Elena, whose daughter would now have college money. About Mateo, whose little girl could get the surgery she needed. About Clara, who could finally afford to fix her car. "It sends the message that quiet doesn't mean powerless," I said. "It sends the message that someone's always watching when you think nobody cares." Which part of her strategy impressed you most? The interview aired at noon. By evening, social media had exploded with videos of working mothers sharing their own stories of being underestimated. Quiet power started trending nationwide. My phone rang again. This time I answered. "Mom?" Julian's voice sounded different, smaller somehow. "I saw the interview. What did you think?" "I thought you looked like the strongest person I've ever known, and I thought I was an idiot for not seeing it sooner." I smiled at that. "Where are you calling from?" "The employee break room at Sterling Industries. Elena let me use her phone. Mine got shut off when Serafina canceled our family plan." "Good," I said. "Rich boys should pay for their own phone service." He laughed, and it was the first genuine laugh I'd heard from him in years. Julian's statement to reporters surprised everyone, including me. "What statement?" "Turn on Channel 6 at 10 tonight, Mom. I have something to say." Julian faced the cameras without his lawyer, without his script, with just the truth. I watched from my office as my son stood on the steps of Sterling Industries, still wearing his cleaning uniform. His Harvard-educated hands were bandaged from industrial chemicals. His expensive haircut had grown out into something more honest. The reporters pushed forward with their microphones. Julian looked directly into the cameras and started talking. "My name is Julian Vance, and I owe my mother an apology that's 30 years overdue." I leaned closer to the television screen. This wasn't the son who'd excluded me from his wedding. This was someone I hadn't seen since he was 12 years old, back when he still thought I hung the moon. 6 months ago, I got married in a mansion my mother paid for through her company contracts. My name was on the guest list, hers wasn't. I stood up in front of 200 people and thanked everyone who raised me, except the woman who actually did it. Julian's voice got stronger as he continued. "I was embarrassed by my mother because she cleaned offices for a living. What I didn't know was that she owned the company that cleaned those offices. What I didn't know was that she'd built a $15 million business while I was busy pretending I came from somewhere else. Some apologies change everything. Subscribe to see which ones count." The reporters started shouting questions. Julian held up his hand for silence. "My mother, Eleanor Vance, owns 51% of Sterling Industries now. She bought that stock with money she earned treating workers fairly while my former father-in-law was stealing from his employees. She's everything I should have been proud of instead of everything I tried to hide. A reporter called out, "What about your marriage to Serafina Sterling?" Julian's jaw tightened. Serafina left me when she found out my mother wasn't ashamed of where she came from. Turns out, I was the one who should have been ashamed of where I was going. "What are your plans now?" another reporter asked. "I'm finishing my month working for Vance & Associates cleaning crew. I'm learning what honest work feels like. Then I'm applying to the Public Defender's Office to represent workers who can't afford lawyers to fight wage theft." I felt tears I didn't know I had. My mother spent 30 years proving she was worth respect. I spent 30 years proving I wasn't worthy of her. That changes today. "Can trust be rebuilt? Tell me your experience." Julian looked directly into the camera. "Mom, if you're watching this, I want to come home. Not to the penthouse Serafina's father bought. Home to Birmingham. Home to the woman who actually raised me." I watched from my office. He'd earned the right to use our family name again. The news crews packed up their equipment, but Julian stayed on those steps for another hour, answering every question with the same honesty he'd just shown the world. My son was finally ready to be my son again. The first check went to Elena's daughter's college fund. The second went to workplace safety training. I stood in the conference room that used to belong to Alistair Sterling, watching lawyers distribute settlement checks to 47 workers who'd been stolen from for years. Each envelope contained back wages, interest, and punitive damages. Some people were getting more money than they'd ever seen at one time. Elena held her check with shaking hands. $18,000. Enough for her daughter Anya's first year at community college with money left over for books and living expenses. "Mrs. Vance," Elena whispered, "I never thought I'd see justice like this." "You helped make it possible," I told her. "Every paycheck stub you saved, every violation you documented. This is your victory." Mateo Diaz looked at his check and started crying. $22,000. Enough for his daughter's surgery, plus the physical therapy she'd need afterward. Real change starts with one person standing up. Who's your inspiration? The settlement money came from Sterling Industries' Emergency Reserve Fund. Money that Alistair had been planning to use for executive bonuses was now paying back the workers he'd cheated. The math felt perfect. But settlement checks were just the beginning. I called the meeting to order using the same gavel Alistair had used to approve cost-cutting measures that hurt workers. Today, we were approving something different. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm announcing the creation of the Vance Worker Justice Fund. This fund will provide legal aid to workers facing wage theft, workplace safety violations, and discrimination." The lawyers nodded approvingly. Julian, sitting in the back of the room in his work clothes, smiled wider than I'd seen in years. The fund will also provide scholarships for workers' children, small business loans for employees who want to start their own companies, and workplace safety training for any business that requests it. Clara Jensen raised her hand. "How much money will the fund have?" I looked at the financial reports Evelyn had prepared. $15 million to start, growing annually through corporate profits and individual donations. The room erupted in applause. 47 workers who'd been ignored for years suddenly saw their futures change. "Elena, I'd like you to consider serving on the fund's board of directors. Your experience with workplace violations could help other workers avoid what you went through." Elena looked shocked. "Me? On a board of directors? You kept detailed records for 3 years while working a job that barely paid your bills. You documented everything without being asked. You're exactly the kind of person who should be making decisions about worker justice." After the meeting, Julian walked me to my car. His work boots looked strange next to my business heels, but somehow it felt right. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "The Public Defender's Office called today. They offered me a position in their labor division. It pays about a quarter of what I was making at the corporate firm." Julian's first case as a labor attorney landed on my desk. He was suing his former corporate firm. I handed him the keys to my old Honda. "Sounds like you're finally ready to drive yourself to work. What about you?" "I'm buying a new car. A truck, actually. Vance & Associates is expanding into construction cleanup. Thought I'd honor your father's memory." We drove home separately that day, but for the first time in years, we were heading in the same direction. Julian brought his first labor case victory to Sunday dinner. No suit, just pride in good work. I set the table the way I used to when he was growing up. 2 plates, 2 glasses, homemade biscuits cooling on the counter, the same kitchen where he'd done homework while I balanced corporate ledgers, the same table where we'd planned his college applications while I planned my business expansion. He walked through my front door at exactly 6 o'clock, carrying a bottle of sweet tea and wearing jeans with actual dirt on the knees. "Victory dinner," he announced, holding up a folder thick with legal documents. "Recovered $38,000 in stolen wages for 6 workers at a textile mill. The company settled rather than face criminal charges." I felt pride swell in my chest. The same pride I'd felt when he graduated Harvard, except this time I wasn't watching from the audience. This time, we were on the same team. "What's the most important lesson your parent taught you?" "Tell me about the case," I said, passing him the mashed potatoes I'd made from scratch. Same pattern we saw at Sterling Industries. Overtime violations, safety equipment denied to save money, immigrant workers threatened with deportation if they complained. Julian's eyes lit up as he talked. But this time the workers had documentation. They'd learned from what you did with Elena's crew. We ate dinner while he explained legal strategies, worker testimonies, and settlement negotiations. The same brain that had once focused on helping rich corporations avoid liability was now dedicated to holding them accountable. "The textile workers want to start a fund like yours," Julian continued. "They're calling it the Julian Vance Legal Defense Network." I nearly choked on my biscuit. "They're naming it after you?" "After us, actually. They said the Vance family taught them that quiet people can fight back and win." After dinner, we sat on my front porch drinking coffee from chipped mugs, the same porch where I'd planned corporate strategies while he was away at college. The same rocking chair where I'd sat alone every Sunday for the past 5 years. "Serafina called yesterday," Julian said quietly. "How's she doing?" "Living with her mother in Charleston. Started a blog about recovering from financial trauma. Apparently, discovering your husband's family isn't poor counts as trauma now." I laughed despite myself. "You dodging a bullet there, son." "I know." Julian rocked back in his chair. "Mom, can I ask you something?" "Always." "Why didn't you fight back sooner? You had the power to buy that company years ago. You could have stopped the wage theft before it hurt so many people." I considered the question while watching fireflies blink in my small yard. Because power without purpose is just bullying, I needed to understand exactly what Alistair Sterling was doing before I could fix it. And I needed you to understand it too. Understand what? That the work matters more than the worker. That treating people with dignity matters more than profit margins. That family means showing up, not just showing off. I handed Julian the keys to Vance and Associates, ready to be my partner. He held the keys like they weighed 100 pounds. "Partners means equals, Mom. Are you ready for that?" I smiled at my son, finally recognizing the boy I'd raised. "I've been waiting 30 years for you to catch up." The office plaque read Vance and Vance, Advocates for Justice. No one called us cleaning ladies anymore. 5 years after the wedding window that changed everything, I sat in the Birmingham office that had grown from a modest cleaning company to a force for worker rights across the Southeast. Julian worked at the desk across from mine, reviewing case files for next week's trials. The walls displayed photos from our victories. Elena's daughter Anya graduating from the University of Alabama with a business degree. Mateo Diaz opening his own auto repair shop with a loan from our fund. Clara Jensen completing her nursing degree and working at the new worker health clinic we'd helped establish. 47 workers had become 470. One settlement had become dozens. One family's reconciliation had become a movement that reached workers in 6 states. My phone buzzed with a text message. Julian's new girlfriend, Liliana, who organized workers at a chicken processing plant in Mississippi. She was exactly the kind of woman I'd hoped he'd find. Someone who understood that real worth came from character, not bank accounts. Drop the one line you'll carry with you from Eleanor's journey. "Mom, you need to see this," Julian said, holding up a legal brief. "Federal labor investigation opened in Texas based on our documentation methods. They're calling it the Vance Protocol." The Vance Protocol. My methods for documenting wage theft and safety violations had become standard practice for worker advocacy groups nationwide. Not bad for a woman who'd started with nothing but a mop bucket and determination. The door chimed as Liliana walked in, still wearing her work clothes from the processing plant. She kissed Julian hello and handed me a folder. 43 workers signed authorization cards, she announced. They want Vance and Vance to represent them in their case against Tyson Foods. I opened the folder and saw the same pattern I'd recognized 5 years ago at Sterling Industries. Stolen overtime, denied safety equipment, threats against workers who complained. Some things never changed. "What do you think, partner?" Julian asked. I looked at my son, who'd learned that real strength came from lifting others up instead of stepping on them. At Liliana, who risked her job every day to help fellow workers. At the photos of families whose lives had been changed by our work. "I think we take the case," I said. "But first we make sure every worker knows their rights and has documentation training." Julian smiled. The Vance Protocol. That evening, Liliana stayed for dinner at my house. We sat around the same kitchen table where Julian had once been embarrassed by his working-class mother. Now he was engaged to a woman who proudly organized workers for better conditions. "Mrs. Vance," Liliana said, "my grandmother wants to meet you. She's been cleaning offices in Houston for 20 years, says you proved invisible women can change the world. The quiet ones often hold the real power. Subscribe so you don't miss their stories." I thought about that grandmother in Houston, working quietly and steadily like I had for so many years. About all the invisible women who kept businesses running while executives took credit for their labor. "Tell your grandmother I'd be honored to meet her," I said, "and tell her that quiet isn't the same as powerless." Outside, the Birmingham streetlights illuminated the modest neighborhood where I'd raised my son and built my empire. Open sky, clear conscience, the story finally written in hands that won't be forgotten. The legacy wasn't the money or the company or even the victories in court. The legacy was Julian, understanding that real family means showing up for each other. That dignity comes from how you treat people when you think nobody's watching. And sometimes, somebody is.